That I spent the last, well, not the last, but spent about 7 days, I guess it was 8 days if you count travel, in Costa Rica on a mission trip. Got back this past Tuesday. I have said numerous times that Brother Chris Stevenson, Brother Chris, I haven't had the chance to properly thank you because I was looking at tickets, getting ready to go down there, and it was about a $200 difference between Delta and everybody else. And the reason for that is because Delta flies direct, Atlanta into Liberia, whereas every other airline had a layover. Some flights were total time, including the layover, 15 hours. Some were 18, some were 19. Delta's was 4. And so Chris said, Chad, it's okay. Go ahead and get that ticket. Thank you, brother. Because especially on that trip home, it's so sad getting on the plane to say goodbye to your friends and to realize that a very productive, fruitful trip for the Lord is coming to an end. But when I got on that plane, I said, wow, I'm so glad that I only have 4 hours, and it really only took about 3.5 to get home as opposed to 18 or 19 or whatever one of those other trips would have been. But had a great trip, as I mentioned this morning. The congregation here totally took care of that. Wade, we were talking about this one day on the trip, and Brother Wade Webster, I'll have a picture of him in a moment. I think most folks are at least familiar with the name, if not the face. But Wade was telling me he knows of a preacher in Arkansas, and he says that the church there, it's a smaller congregation, and so they actually, they might have another foreign work or two that they support, but he said that's one of their big mission work, even foreign missions, is their preacher. So they send him on a trip, I think a couple of times a year, and he goes, and they have, I think, a school in this location and things like that. And so I told Wade, I said, that would be okay with me. And I'm very thankful that without having to go and raise funds, the Bremen congregation sent me. And so I think there's a special application of this presentation to you all, to the family here at Bremen, because you sent me on this trip. And I'm very, very thankful for that. A lot of good was done in the name of the congregation here, but more importantly, and most importantly, in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You see the title slide here. This is not my picture. This is just a picture I grabbed because I wanted to have a sort of a title slide. But this expression, pura vida, it's a Costa Rican expression. You see it on a lot of different souvenir type things in Costa Rica, and it just kind of means having the time of your life. I'd never heard it until one night we were at this brother's house, and I'll show you him in just a moment. And we were just cutting up and having a good time, and he looks at me, and it's very difficult to communicate with these folks without a translator because I know very little Spanish, and they know even less English, most of them anyways. And so he one day he says, pura vida. And I said, pura vida. And I said to Hainer, what does pura vida mean? And so he told me, and they kind of explained, this is something they say a lot in Costa Rica. It means you're having the time of your life. And I wanted that on my title slide because I did. I had the time of my life, but it wasn't about having fun. That was ancillary, and incidentally, we had a lot of fun. But we did a lot of work for the Lord, and that's the reason we went. This is the slide I had up just a moment ago. This is, you see the arrow there pointing to Bagaces. I'm trying to remember that. I kept pronouncing it wrong, and Hainer corrected me. And I think he's watching our broadcast right now, so he may be cringing if I mispronounce that. But wouldn't be the first time this Alabama boy mispronounced a Spanish word or a Spanish pronunciation. So Bagaces, if I'm saying that right, is where you see up there just a little bit north of it is Liberia, where we flew into. We almost flew into San Jose also, which was going to be a little bit cheaper, but you can see the distance there. It's about 3 hours for Hainer to have come and picked us up at the airport. Also, very fortunate that we didn't fly into San Jose because on Monday, before we flew out on Tuesday, the volcano erupted in San Jose. Shut down the airport and basically the entire city for at least a day. I think the airport was going to be shut down for 2 days. And so that would have been a much more difficult situation as well. But that gives you an idea of where we were. I think I kind of cropped it out of this picture, but up here a little bit north and east is Nicaragua. And that's where some of us were just this past summer, and Lord willing will be again this coming July. Over here you see, lost it. It may not be on this map. I may be thinking of a different map, but it's somewhere over in here was it's the Pacific Ocean, but there's a beach that we went to on our last day. It's called Cocoa Beach, but anyway, it's somewhere in that general area. But let's jump right in. A lot to tell you about on this trip. I won't get to tell you everything, and there are even more pictures on Facebook. I'm really glad also that I'm not on Facebook a lot. I tell people I'm kind of a lurker on Facebook. I look at people's stuff and I see different things, but I don't post a whole lot. And the day I was leaving, Brother Chris and I were talking on the phone, and he said, "Now, you're going to post lots of pictures so we can see what you're up to, right?" And I said, "Oh, sure, of course." And hadn't really given it a whole lot of thought. So after that kind of had it on my mind. And so a lot of things that are posted on Facebook, and that's the good thing, because what I can't get to here, if you want to see more pictures, there's more that's available there on Facebook to kind of chronicle our journey. So I flew out from Atlanta, 6 o'clock Eastern time, Monday, February the 6th. Part of my trip, I was wanting to take Hayner some of his books. He went to preaching school at Brown Trail School of Preaching. They have a Spanish-speaking section of their school of preaching. They have instructors that teach that in Spanish, and they work with them on teaching them English as well, but the school is for Spanish-speaking students. So he went to school there, but due to cost was unable to get his books back, and so we've looked into shipping them down there. It's super expensive. Sometimes some people have said if you ship something down there, it may get there, it may not. So we decided probably the best thing to do is when we take some of these, if somebody takes a trip and there's anybody from within our area that's going to go, give them a carry-on or a checked bag. You can get up to 50 pounds. Most airlines with a checked bag. It's a reasonable fee, and you take books down there that way. So I took two bags of 50 pounds worth of books down there. When I got to the airport, bag number 1 was 56 pounds. And I told the lady, I said, well, I knew this one might be heavy. I may have to move some books over to my backpack. I don't know if she misunderstood and thought I was talking about throwing some books away, but she asked me, "Are you going down there on a mission trip?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "You're not moving anything." And she said, "We'll make it work." And so she finagled it around, and she made it work. And so I got away with that. Bag number 2 was 48. We had it almost right on the dot. But anyway, so this is a picture of the sunset as we're taking off from Atlanta. Here's our crew. It was just 4 people, two people with a translator per person. You know who the guy on the left is, hopefully. Wade Webster is right here in the sport coat. Then you have Cesar Gutierrez. I had to look up Cesar's last name. Among members of the church in Central America, and a lot of people in the United States, all you have to do is say Cesar, and people know who you're talking about. Cesar is a great, great brother, and he does a lot of good work for the Lord, and he's a tremendous translator. And right there with him as far as being able to translate and the work that he does for the Lord is Hayner Montealto. And so Hayner is doing a great work down there. They've had at least, I'm thinking, 2 campaigns previous to ours. One was a bigger campaign. This is an area where it's hard to do a bigger campaign because they don't have the hotels. In San Marcos, that's not a really big city in Nicaragua, but there just happens to be that place, and Chris is familiar with it from our last trip. The Hacienda is what it's called, and they've got it's almost like a ranch. With little cottages and things like that, and it just works out really well. And they provided meals and everything. But Gases is not like that. There are a hotel or 2, maybe. I think there are a couple of hotels, but it's just harder to do a bigger campaign. And so I'm not really sure with the bigger campaign if they drove from a bigger city or what. But I say that to say this: there was another campaign that basically handed out Bibles and did some Bible study with people with the Spanish Bibles. But all that is to say that, Paul talks about one plants the seed, one waters it, God gives the increase. But there's a lot that goes into people becoming a Christian. And one of the things that we're careful about is we don't go and try to rush people into the water so that we can come home and say, "Oh, look at all the baptisms we've had." Because what good is that? What we're trying to do is to teach people about the Lord so that they obey the gospel, not that they just get dunked in water. We want to make sure that they know what they're doing and they're going to be faithful to the Lord. Now, that doesn't always ensure that they're going to be faithful, but we're striving to teach people. And so just like with our Yes To campaign that some of us here are familiar with, we sat down and had a lot of occasions to teach, but we had the added benefit that some other people had been doing some teaching before. And so a lot of times we were seeing quick results because other people had sowed the seed and watered it and fertilized, and so the seed was ready to bring forth. But, of course, God gives the increase. But that's our team. That's actually on the day that we were leaving. We had a fellow there helping with the bags, and he took this picture at the airport the day. That's just moments before we went in to go through security and all. Food. You can't talk about a trip without talking about food, or at least I can't. Somebody said it looked like all you did was eat, but Wade said if you put pictures of food, people are more likely to take notice. They'll stop and they'll read more about your trip. So I said, okay, I'm going to try that. But here's some of the food. I'll go through this quickly, but it's interesting. You go to different places and you try different food. This was where our trip took a very different. It veered far off course from a Yes To campaign, because at Yes To everything is you have spin there, and he'll say now don't eat that. That's not safe. You shouldn't eat that. Don't drink this, or that is okay, that's not okay. We got into people's homes, for instance. Here, I think we all know what that is, cafe. But do you see this contraption? That's how a lot of Costa Ricans make their coffee. We called it the coffee sock, not in front of them. Well, we did call it that in front of them, but they didn't understand what we were saying. But it looks like an old sock that somebody's making coffee in, but that's how they do it there. He was talking to us. We actually went to see a sister who's been very sick. She wasn't home. Her son was there kind of watching the house while she was away at the doctor. And Hainer began talking to him, wanted to talk to him about the gospel. And as it turns out, the guy, he loves to cook. And he says his dream one day is to go and get training to become a chef. And so as he's talking to us and we're talking to him, at that point it was more Hainer talking to him in Spanish, but they're discussing the Bible. And he's piddling, he puts water on and gets it hot, and then he scoops out some coffee, and I can smell the coffee, so I know what he's doing. And something was said at cafe, and I looked at Hainer and I said, I hope this is okay, because I can't say no to coffee. And Hainer said, yeah, I think it'll be okay. So we did. We had a cup of coffee, and he was very nice and gracious to us, and he fixed coffee. But that's typically how most of the folks in Costa Rica make their coffee. Up here you have, I have no idea how you pronounce that, buñuelo maybe, but it's kind of like, I actually looked it up on, what do you call the site? Wikipedia, just to see, and it's like Mexican fritters is what they call it, something similar to that, kind of like is it sopapilla that you can get in the Mexican restaurant sometimes, something similar to that. These people, we were sitting down with this couple that I'll show you in just a moment. We were getting ready to study, and this young couple, I think they were brother and sister, they came by and had several of these, and we bought every one that they had, and then they put some, it looks like honey on top. It's quite good. We had our study, and then we enjoyed eating those with this couple. Down here you see tamarindo. This is it's a type of fruit, but you take it, you boil it, and mix it with water, and then they refrigerate it, and it makes a good drink. That was when I first realized. Hainer told us when we got there, he says, you can drink the water here, it's okay. And Wade says, okay, so Chad, drink the water and tell me if it's okay. And I said, no, you drink the water, you tell me if it's okay. So we were trying to wait each other out. Meanwhile, we all go to this couple's house, and they served us tamarindo juice with ice. That was made from their water, tap water. So it turns out it's okay. You can drink the water in Costa Rica. Later on, we were at a fellowship. I was teaching the new converts class after the fellowship meal on Sunday, and this brother's wife, I'll show you in just a moment, she, when I got done with the class, she says to me, there's always that funny look when you're trying to communicate with someone, and you can't speak their language and they can't speak yours. And so she looks at me and she says, agua frio, cold water. And I know enough Spanish to know that. And so I said, sí, por favor. And so she gets me some water. They had a refrigerator there, and so she gets it out, and there's this gallon jug that looks just like in America when you buy water in a jug. Well, it was the first time. Then they fill it up from the tap, and they put it in the refrigerator to get cold. So it's okay to drink the water. I found that out the hard way. This is at Sister Rosemary's house. Carlos and Rosemary, I'll show you them in just a moment. I meant to ask Hayner before I did this. I think it's papaya with milk. It's some kind of tropical fruit, but it's mixed with milk. That wasn't my favorite drink of the trip, but I smiled and I said thank you, and I drank it all up. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't that great. Fresh pineapple down here, bottom left. I don't know where my laser. There we go. That's fresh pineapple. Also a watermelon here that Hayner's neighbor gave him. The fused tea was just bought in the store. It just happened to be there in the picture. That's incidental. I didn't waste my time with. You know me turn these lights down, Brian? Would that help? Is that okay? I didn't waste my time with any kind of bottled tea or anything when you got that good of coffee. So I tried to stick to the cafe. But the fresh pineapple you just can't beat. I got one of those in Nicaragua last year, and it's just amazing. Here is their yogurt. It comes in like I don't know what size that is. We would, would be half gallon here. But you can see the little glass poured of it. You pour it out into a glass, and that is the best yogurt I've ever had in my life. I'm pretty sure I owe Hayner money for how much of that yogurt I consumed. And then you see Hugo juice de naranja y zanahoria, I think is how you say that. It's orange and carrot juice. It was different, but not bad. Not great either. But the regular old orange juice over here had a different taste to it. This is Hayner's mother. We went one day to visit Hayner's parents. Hayner's dad's not a Christian. His mother is still a fairly new Christian. He has studied with her and has been able to teach her the gospel, and she's obeyed it. She also studied with a local preacher in that area, and so he was able to help her to become a Christian. His dad knows what to do. He knows absolutely what he needs to do to become a Christian. He knows he's not right with the Lord. I don't know. In fact, we even asked him, do you know what's holding you back? And he never really had a definitive answer for that. And, we sort of left the conversation with, we look forward to hearing the day when you become a Christian. We hope that day will come soon because we just don't know what life holds. And so very, very nice man. He's a farmer. And in fact, the black bean soup here, the black beans were grown by Hayner's dad, if I remember that correctly. Just a super nice couple. And if you remember the picture of Hayner, I told his mother, through Hayner obviously translating, as soon as I saw her, I said, I could tell you're Hayner's mother because he really favors his mom. And it's interesting, moms are the same in every country. I've discovered that. They're going to go to a lot of trouble when their baby boy comes to visit. And so she went all out for us. She made this bean soup right here in the jug. That is fresh, hand-squeezed orange juice. The dirt road to get to their house, Hayner drives a little Corolla, and so it sits really low, so we had to stop and had to hike about maybe quarter mile or so. I don't even know if it was that far, but a little bit. And as we're going, we see these trees, and they're just laden with oranges. And so she went and got oranges and hand squeezed them for us. And that's the best orange juice I've ever had. And so she made a really nice meal for us. Of course, Scott, we had to have rice with our beans. So we had, you can see up there I put rice in the soup. But that soup was phenomenal. And incidentally, when we were leaving, moms are the same in every country. When we're leaving, she's got little Tupperware type containers. She's sending the leftovers home with her single son and all his bachelor friends to make sure we had some food. And I'm so thankful that she sent home the rest of that orange juice. I don't know what happened to that, but it didn't last very long when we got back. Hayner also, his parents have coconuts growing on their property. You see the coconut here? Oh, and I'm about to forget, the very first day, this is the first thing I ate in Costa Rica, besides Burger King. There's a Burger King in Liberia. But the water apple, I never heard of that. Reagan said they had something similar to this in Taiwan, right? Call it a bell fruit or something like that. Not really. It's almost the texture of a pear. A little bit sour, not very sweet. It was pretty good. But so I went ahead and I polished that off. You see, I've already chowed into it before I thought to take a picture. The coconut, Wade kept going on and on about how coconuts and the water inside of them, and I guess I've heard people talk about that before, but I forgot. You chop into those things, and it's actually pressurized in there. When you chop in, it'll spray out just a little bit. So he gives me this. Wade's talking about, oh, it's a superfood. You could drink that, and it's really hydrating and all this stuff. And so, no thanks. It was not very good. Some people love it, but it just wasn't that great to me. Then Hayner's dad took the machete and chopped the thing open so we could actually get the pineapple out. Not my thing. A lot of people love pineapple, especially fresh pineapple, but it's just not, I'm not crazy about it. And there's the tree on their dad's property. I mean, it's literally 20 yards maybe from the house. It's just right there. They can go pick coconuts and all kinds of different things that they've got on their property. Really neat place. They live out in the country. This is interesting. The bottom left picture, there's some chicken dish and, of course, rice and beans. You can see on the rice, it's something, I don't know what they called it. They probably told me and I've forgotten, but it's kind of like a coarser version of like chow chow. And it's vinegar based, and I put it on the rice, and it was really good. But there's a chicken dish that we had with that. Up top here, one night, we got in from some of our studies, and we came to Carlos's house, and I'll show you him in just a moment. They served us some snacks. Up there at the top, you see boiled banana. That's the one thing I didn't try. One of the few things I did not try. I don't know. It just, the visual appeal was not there for me. And so somebody said, I think one of the guys tried it and said it was pretty good, but I don't know. Just the thought of boiling a banana didn't sound good to me. But then there you have fried pig skins. That was really good. I was thinking of you, Jake. I mean, I knew Jake would like this bacon-esque snack. But what's funny is the mandarin lemon. It looks like an orange. And so what Wade does is he picks up one of those little triangles, and he just goes, and it's lemon. And so it really, really shocked his system when that sour lemon hit him. And it was quite amusing. I wish I had been able to record that moment because it was quite hilarious. This is jocote, and it's a type of berry. When they get ripe, they're sweet, but when they're green, as they are here, this little fella at the baptism of one sister that I'll show you in a minute, this tree was just down there by the river, and so this one little kid, Carlos gave me one and says, here, and I think he was trying to mess with me because it's sour, but I love sour stuff, and so I ate one. I said, that's pretty good. Well, this little kid, Carlos, he's climbing the tree. He's going to get Mr. Chad some jocote fruit. And so I had a hand, that's just a few of them, but I ended up, that was before he went up the tree. And he got several. But they taste just like if you've ever eaten green, unripe blueberries. We used to eat them as a kid because they were so sour. But that's what they taste like. This is from breakfast one morning. There's a lot more food I could show you, but that's kind of some of the interesting food things. But we also had a lot of fellowship. Here you see Cesar in the middle, and he is with Jose and Marta. This is a couple that lives in Liberia, and they come over to Bagaces to be with the church there, and they're members there, and really, really nice couple. They served us the tamarindo juice. Really, really nice couple, and we visited them, saw them again on Sunday, of course. On the left here is Diego and Francine. Diego teaches a class on Sunday morning at the congregation in Bagaces, and he is he's planning to. I don't know if he's decided for sure yet where. I think he's maybe leaning toward Brown Trail where Hayner went, possibly somewhere. But he wants to go to preaching school. He wants to train to preach. And ironically, we've already noticed that there, with a couple of more Christians in this one particular area, they're going to need a new congregation out there. Because it's only about 10 minutes from the congregation where Hayner is preaching, but it's an area, there are dirt roads. Many of the people, most of the people, almost all of the people don't have transportation. There's public transportation, but it doesn't run on Sunday. And so there was about, if these four others that I'll show you in a moment obey the gospel, there will be about 10 Christians out there, which would make a small congregation for that area for people who can't, they really just, without a ride, they can't make it to services, or at least it's very, very difficult. So that's Diego and Francine. I mentioned to a couple people, I think maybe Wednesday night. Diego is a former professional soccer player, and I wanted to get some video of him with a soccer ball because he messed up his foot real bad, and I think that's why he stopped playing. But really good just a good guy, and he went on a lot of Bible studies with us. And his wife there, Francini, is this brother, Carlos Araya, his daughter. Carlos has 4 daughters. I'll show you those in just a moment. This guy, we spent a lot of time at his house, and this was one of the better parts of our trip, even though he's already a Christian. But we found out later, as Hainer was telling us, he was not as crazy about the gringos. Had, I think, maybe a bad experience with some folks coming in and kind of turning their nose up at some of the food, turning their nose up at this, and maybe kind of even trying to do things, this is how it's got to be done kind of thing. But he just, for whatever reason, had a bad experience. And so it was noticeably a little bit chilly, frigid when we first arrived at his house. And so then we got to cutting up. And Sister Rosemary came out and brought us that papaya and milk drink that, as I said, it wasn't my favorite, but we drank it and we thanked her. And she brought out some bread and she brought out some coffee. And I was excited about that. And we started goofing off and having fun. And next thing you know, we're just having a blast. And I think it was by that night or the next night when Carlos is saying to me, Pura Vida. And, one day we were eating, if I can back up just a little bit here, this meal, the breakfast. And, you can see, Carlos, he figured me out by this time. He heaps me a big helping of rice and beans there. So he fixed me up good with the food. But I was telling the folks in the Wednesday night class that he's telling Hainer, and they're laughing. And I figured out whenever they laugh, they're talking about me. But they're laughing, and so I said, "Go ahead, Hainer. What's he saying?" And he said, "Brother Carlos," he says, he loves this boy, talking about me. And I said, "Oh, okay, well that's nice." I'm thinking, well, I'm a pretty likable guy. And he says, "Oh yeah, he loves you." He says he eats with desire. And so we have not forgotten that. I don't think I will ever forget that. And I said, well, I don't think truer words could ever have been spoken. And I told him, I told Hainer through Brother Hainer, I said, I can't wait to get home and tell the folks at home that, because they will understand just how true that is, that Chad eats with desire. So that's one of those things that just, you come home from a trip and you have these little things that stick with you, and that's one of them. He says that he loved me because I eat with desire. But he had a good time that week picking at me, and so, like I said, whenever they were laughing, it was pretty much a guarantee they were talking about me. Here are Carlos's girls. In the middle is Sister Rosemary, that's his wife. The youngest daughter, Melanie, Jerlyn, if I'm pronouncing their names correctly, Francini, and Julie on the right. I forget which of those three. The 3 older girls are pretty close together in age, maybe 2 or 3 years apart. And then Melanie was the surprise. She's 14. What is today? The 19th. She'll be 15 in about 4 days, I believe. It's February 23rd, I believe, is her birthday. It's humorous when you're trying to communicate with people and you can't speak the language. But I was talking to the ladies one night. We were sitting at Carlos's house and we're having coffee and some kind of snacks. It might have been the night we had the fried pigskins. But I went into the kitchen for something. I think I was going to refill my water. And so the girls were in there. And so I stopped by and I said to Melanie, I put my hand on her shoulder. I said, Melanie, 14. She says, si. And then she says something, and I hear her keen say, she's, like any teenager, she's telling you, I'm about to be 15. So, we want to round up when we're that age. And so I said, And I looked at the mother, Rosemary, and I said, mi hijo, that's my son, mi hijo es 13, 13, talking about Joshua. And they looked, and I said, I looked back at Melanie and I said, mi hijo es 13. And then all the girls go, oh, they got it. And so sometimes you can communicate with very few words. And so I told Brother Carlos I'd have to come back and maybe we could start talking dowry or something, It's a great, great family, though. They're just really nice people. One day I spilled some water when I was refilling. They've got it's a bottled water jug, kind of like, the water cooler at work. And so I'm refilling and I spilled some water. And so I went and grabbed a paper towel and I clean it up. And Miss Rosemary, she says to me, she says, tu esposa bueno. And so I sit here and I'm thinking, I know a few words. And so I know bueno is good. Esposa is spouse. 2 is you. So she says, you good spouse. So I'm thinking, what? And then she says, bueno esposa. And I realized she's saying, you're a good spouse. And I said, oh, and I said, mi esposa. She understood that. And so I said, I've been trained well. And so all I could figure out to say that was, but sometimes you can communicate without words. But we had a great time with this family. Just a wonderful, wonderful group of people. Here are these children. This is Samantha and Gabriel. Samantha is Geraldine's daughter. Gabriel is Julie's son. These are 2 of Hayner's closest friends, the Birds, I mean. Down here in the bottom right, I think his parents they were his for years, obviously, but they're his parents now. I think there's 3 of them, but we got 2 of them in the picture there. And I kept getting so tickled because Cesar would try to, he finally got the bird to sit on his shoulder, and he would turn something, I don't know if somebody calling or what, but he would turn, and that bird didn't like it, and he'd go, and he'd peck at him. And we were just getting so tickled at that. Here's Hayner sitting in the hammock. That's right outside the door as we were studying with his dad. I think it was actually after our study, I took a picture of Hayner. Said I was going to get a picture of him being lazy on our trip. There's a picture of Melanie. She loves to fish, so we took a picture of her with her tackle box. This is an interesting spot and on the way to Hayner's parents. This has been on National Geographic and different television shows. I hope you can see the road is going up. It's a hill. He stops in the middle of the road, which didn't make me too comfortable. But he stops in the middle of the road and he says, all right, watch. He puts the car in neutral. We're at a complete standstill. He lets go. And we began rolling up the hill in neutral and gaining speed. I mean, it never got fast, but it's picking up a little bit of speed. And it's something to do with the Earth's magnetic pull. But it's one of those just odd spots in the world where, a lot of people say, oh, there's no explanation for it. There actually is a scientific explanation, but it's really neat because you can see when you're sitting in the car, you're going up a hill, and even though you're sitting there in neutral. This was on the way to Julie's house. Carlos's daughter, we went up there one night. You see Carlos packed us in like sardines into his, I think it was a Toyota Land Cruiser. I told Cesar, he looks like that's straight off of Honduras' 10 Most Wanted Men. I don't know if Cesar just didn't like being in there packed in so tight with all of us or what, but Wade got the good seat. He got to sit up front. But anyway, we're all packed in there. There was 4 or 5 ladies in the back, all of his daughters and wife, and then us in the middle row. And we went up to visit a sister who her husband was in jail. He had been falsely accused of attempted rape by a lady. And in Costa Rica, you don't have as much due process, at least not with something like that, as you do here in America. You make the accusation, and they throw a man in jail. And it's put him in jail and ask questions later. This brother is something like in his 60s, and they throw him in jail. His wife was distraught. And so we went up there and visited with her. Some of her family was there, so I had a good chance to visit with them, have a prayer with them. He has since been able to not go home because he runs a store out of his house, a little store. Not surprisingly, the lady who has made this accusation, she owes him money. And so he was not allowed to go home because that supposedly is where this incident took place. But he's been allowed to go to one of his daughter's houses and stay there until it's either figured out or the trial is over. But this was on the way up there, and Julie and her husband live in that area. So we went and visited them after we were done visiting with that sister. So that was a fun trip. And I discovered then that I thought it was just Hayner, although he's right up there. But apparently all Costa Ricans drive with desire. Let's just say that. This was Monday night before returning home on Tuesday. We were at Jose and Rosa's house. I'll show you them in just a moment. Carlos went with us. We took some food to them. We'll show you that in a moment. But when we were leaving the house, Wade was going to defer to his brother, Carlos, and give him the front seat. Wade had been sitting in the front seat because he's 8 feet tall, so it makes sense. So he was going to he'd been sitting in the front seat, and Carlos just said, no. And Wade said, well, I'm in the car. I'm not moving. You take the front seat. And he says, I'm not taking the front seat. So he goes and sits down in the back. So I said, Cesar, you take the front seat. Cesar says, no, I'm not taking the front seat. And he sits down in the back. And so Carlos looks at me, and he says, again, we can't communicate very much, but he looks at me and he says, El Jefe. El Jefe means the boss. And so he says, Hainer turns around and tells me, he says, Carlos says, tonight you're the boss. You're going to sit in the front. So you can see, not pictured here is El Jefe. He's in the front. So that night I got to be El Jefe. We got a big kick out of that because, I'm probably, 6 inches shorter than the shortest of those guys, but I got the front seat. So, and I kept teasing Wade about it. I said, sure is comfortable up here, Wade. But he's not only is he in the middle, in the back, he's in the middle. So, but anyway, this was at Carlos' house the last night. We were saying our goodbyes to his family. Diego and Francini had been to San Jose that day with Rosemary, and they were just getting home. In fact, we stayed later than we wanted to so we could wait for them and tell them goodbye. We got everybody together for some pictures. Now, the faith section. These are some of our Bible studies. This is Antonio and Leda. Bottom right, you see we had company during our Bible study. The monkeys were playing in the trees. This is just like right across the little dirt road in the tree. The monkeys are playing all through our study. There were 2 of them in that tree, and it was. I've never just seen monkeys out in the open like that, but it was. They said that's fairly common around there. Up the top right, you see that's in the middle of our first study. This is at the end of our first study when we were leaving their house. And as you see, this resulted in a baptism. Wade took this picture with his phone, and it just happened. I love that. Now he put it on Facebook, and we were talking about it. Reminds you of the song "Heavenly Sunlight, Flooding My Soul with Glory Divine." And so I really like that picture. But that's Antonio at his baptism. That would have been Thursday morning, I believe. And then Antonio then assisted with baptizing his wife, Leda. This is in the river there. I forget what the name of that river is, but it's right close to the church building and close to Hainer's property. It's gorgeous out there. It's absolutely, it just seems like everywhere you go to a river out there, it's just so picturesque. And then here they are. That's a little bridge. The dirt road crosses over that river, and so we took their picture there. A really nice scene. But that's a sweet couple, and they missed the Sunday service for some reason. I forget what happened. They may have been sick or something, but I talked to Hainer after getting home, and they were at Wednesday night Bible study, so that's good. This is Javier and his son Carlos and Aaron over here. Aaron was a hoot. He'd pretend like he didn't want his picture made, but then he'd come over there and really mess with me and try to get me to take his picture. Javier you could tell he's a very serious-looking man, and we would be studying with Javier, and I'm thinking he's about to kick us out of his house. And especially because I can't understand what he's saying, and he would talk so, with a very deep voice and serious, and you'd almost just think, this guy, he's upset with us. What have we done to offend him or something? But he was studying, and he's reasoning things out, and he's thinking, and he had some questions originally on the Holy Spirit. And so our first study centered around that, but I think that would have been Tuesday night, he obeyed the gospel. He was the first person to obey the gospel on our trip. But he's an auto mechanic and very good, but a hard-working man. And like I said, it's a classic example of you can't judge a book by its cover, because he was sitting there looking and not understanding the language, and I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going. And the next thing you know, he's saying, I know what I need to do. I need to obey the gospel. So that was really neat. And here we are at his baptism. And later on, this was a little bit later in the week. It took a little bit more studying, but his wife, I just went blank. I think I got another picture up here. She obeyed the gospel as well. Yes, Yendri. I don't know for sure if I'm spelling that right or even pronouncing it right. Sometimes it's hard to pronounce. Sometimes it's hard to spell because even when you see the spelling, words are pronounced differently. J's are silent. We would say naranja for orange, but they say naranja and things like that. So sometimes I just do the best I can. But Javier Yendri and their family. The daughter on the right, Daniela, we studied with her some, and her friend, I can't remember the friend's name. They may end up obeying the gospel before too long. She's a lot like her dad. She's hard to read if she's interested, but she had a lot of questions. So who knows? But now the husband and wife are united in Christ, so that's wonderful. And we encourage them. Now you can begin to teach your children. And sure enough, first thing Sunday morning, Javier, he was there for worship. This lady is, it looks like Mariuri, but they pronounced her name Marjorie. Carlos, I believe this is Carlos, on the right there. And then Andres, I kept calling Andres Carlos. I hope I've got him straight now. I went through a whole conversation with this kid, or at least as much a conversation as we could have. But I kept calling him Carlos, and he was just smiling because he knew I was going to give him candy. And he didn't care what I called him, as long as I kept the chiclets coming. That's what they call the candy. I was giving him little pieces of like icebreakers and stuff. As long as the chiclets were coming, he didn't care what I called him. But finally, the mother said something, and I said, "What'd she say?" And Hainer said, "That's Andres." Oh, okay. But and then you got little Benjamin over here. Benjamin and we made friends real quick, and so I had fun. I used to do this with my own children. You throw them up in the air, and we used to laugh about it because it's the look of sheer terror and sheer joy all rolled into one. You kind of toss them up, and it's like, I'm going to die, and then you catch them, and it's like, oh, that was fun. And so this picture was caught on the joy part. but a couple times I'd throw them up, and he'd just be, But we had a lot of fun with, these were special people. This was my first study, and so they were kind of special to me. And Sister Marjorie she ended up becoming Sister Marjorie. You see here her baptism, and there, right after the baptism. We did several of our baptisms right at this spot at the river. Then her mother, Delia, was baptized. I think it was a day later. We studied once with both of them together, and then we studied again later separately, and she obeyed the gospel, Marjorie did. And then we studied again later with Delia, and Marjorie was gone to town, and so Delia obeyed the gospel. Now, I'm a little bit concerned about them. I've been checking in with Hainer, but he's going to keep encouraging them. So sometimes I think folks, maybe they don't understand the commitment. It wasn't for lack of instruction, because that's what I told Hainer. I said, of all the studies, I think we covered that the most with those two. What it means to be in Christ, and what it means if you turn your back and go outside of Christ and leave for a denomination or leave for the world or something like that. But hopefully they're babes in Christ, and so it's hopefully they're going to grow and do what they need to do. But that's Delia, and that's Marjorie's mother. They're both single moms. Marjorie's never been married. Delia was married. Her husband died. I forget how many years ago. He developed a really, really bad kidney infection and never got over it and lost his life. So they live together and take care of one another. And there they are. We were driving to pick up Javier's wife Sunday after services. She decided to be baptized, and so we were going to pick her up and getting ready to go to the river. And we said, "There's Marjorie and Delia." And so I said, "Stop the car, Hainer, let me out." And so I wanted to find out what was going on, because they weren't at services Sunday. They had become Christians, but they missed their first Sunday. So I said, "Stop the car, Hainer. Y'all going up there, and we'll meet you there. I want to go talk to them." And this time I remembered the translator. And so Cesar got out with me, and we encouraged them. But that was on Sunday, and my little buddy Andres, and up here, that's at Delia's baptism, I think, when I had that picture taken with him. But my little buddy Andres, I called him over there, and he was just kind of hanging around, and he would just jibber jabber something, and all I could catch was chiclet. And so I knew what he wanted. So I had about, 10 or 15 of those little sour icebreakers left in my container. And so I called him over there, and I said, I forget what it was. Anyway, Cesar told me how to ask him, could he keep a secret? He grinned, yeah. And so I just gave him the whole thing, and he was excited about that, to get all those chiclets. And this is Angelica. I don't have any other pictures of her from our actual study, but this is the night when she obeyed the gospel. You may notice this picture. Her foot is sticking out of the water. I only got a picture of the first time. We had to redo that because she didn't get immersed. And so we caught that. I think Cesar realized it anyways. Hayner was in a study, so Cesar actually did the baptism, but she was fully immersed the next time. But Angelica, her mother is a Christian and a member of the church at Bagaces, and is very ill. She's dealing with a lot of health problems, and that's this lady is the sister of the man we studied with the first day that made us coffee in the coffee sock. So she ended up didn't even know that she had that much interest, but we asked her. And by the way, I mentioned this in Nicaragua. We had 2 people that said, no, I don't want to study, or I didn't really have any interest in studying. In Costa Rica, obviously there were fewer people, so there were fewer contacts as far as numbers of different people. Nobody said, I don't want to study the Bible. Nobody said, I'm too busy. I don't have time. Every single person we approached was willing to sit down and talk about the Bible with us. Even people who weren't interested. Wade has a picture on his Facebook page of a lady, so-called, she calls herself a Pentecostal preacher. She still wanted to sit down and study. And so everybody was willing to study. But this is Angelica's baptism into Christ. She was there on Sunday as well. This is our Monday night. This was our last actual study. We weren't intending to study with this particular family. This is Jose and Rosa, and Jose and Rosa's son. I think I got his name on here. Victor, and his wife Anna. I don't remember the children's name, but that little girl was as cute as a button. And she did not care that she didn't speak English and that I didn't speak Spanish. She would look at me and she would 90 miles an hour talking to me. And I caught Pero and I caught Blanco. Something about her dog, who is a white dog. And that's all I got. Pequeño, I think. He's a little dog. So I standing there and I'm literally looking at her, and they're studying. We were laughing because Cesar was done translating at this point. We were all exhausted. Cesar's done translating, so he's just conducting the study himself in Spanish, which he's certainly capable of doing. He's one of the great Bible students in that area. But she's talking to me, and I'm looking at her, and I'm smiling, and I said, "Sweetie, I don't know a word you're saying, but I'm going to look at you, and I'm going to grin, and I'm gonna nod my head, and I'm going to say, mm-hmm." And she was just eating it up, and she just keep going. And she loved it. I don't know what she was saying. She might have been saying, "You're the ugliest gringo I've ever seen," but I just smiled and went on. This little boy, I remember his name because his name is Joshua. And I was telling him my oldest son's name is Joshua. He's the oldest. He took me outside while they're studying. I was trying to kind of occupy the children so they could study. This is the last night. Time's running out. And so really the best thing at that point was to study in Spanish only to save time and try to cover as much as we possibly could. So I go outside with him and the little girl, and they're showing me all around, and he's pointing out on the ground. He says, "Cafe." They had coffee plants growing on their property. Okay. Then he's showing me a tree, papaya. And so he's showing me all these different things. Well, he brings me this fruit. And I just realized I didn't put it down. I don't remember the name. I don't think I posted it anywhere. I had to. I think Hayner's watching this. Send me a message, Hayner, and tell me what that is if you think about it. But he wanted me to. He brought me a little bag of that fruit and wanted me to have that before I left. Very, very sweet family. They've had a terrible experience with denominationalism. I told the class Wednesday night, her preacher came. She didn't have money. He wants to know, why are you not tithing? And she tells him, I don't have a job. I can barely make ends meet. And he asked her how many chickens she has. She says, I have about 40. And he says, well, you need to give me 4. You need to tithe your chickens if you're not going to tithe your money. It really upset her. And to her credit, she was enough of a Bible student. She knew that wasn't right. And she told him, she said, you're lazy. You go get a job and you go work if you want chickens. And you buy your own. And so she was really frustrated with him. Victor had some similar type experiences and was very frustrated. They're just an open book. And they were sponges just soaking it up. I would not be surprised at all to see those 4 adults become Christians before very long. I think they're very interested. The biggest hindrance right now is they've got a bad taste in their mouth because of a bad experience. But hopefully that's going to continue. Our study went great. In fact, we stopped by Pollo Landia, which translates to chicken land, and we got some fried chicken. And, Popeyes, KFC, they got nothing on this place. There was some really good fried chicken. In fact, it's the biggest pieces of fried chicken I've ever seen. And so we took it to their house, and Wade remarked, I thought it was pretty neat. Her preacher came demanding chickens. We came bringing chicken. And so, I told her in our first study, I said, we're not interested in your money. I said, if you become a Christian, you will give, but it'll be a free will offering, and that'll be between you and God. But I said, until then, we're interested in your soul. We want to help you get right with God. And so I think that made an impression on them. We had a wonderful meal with that family that night. So that was neat. And Carlos was with us on that visit as well. They also have a little pet parakeet you can see right there, and he was pretty funny. Now, future. This is not a mustard seed type tree, but I just thought about this when it made that verse come to mind. I forget what this tree is called. It's some type of a Florida fig is what they call it. That's kind of a nickname. But it reminded me of this verse that Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which is indeed the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs and becometh the tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. The future of this congregation is bright. There are so many people who are interested in the gospel. In fact, this is their land. They already own a spot of land where they can build a bigger building, and maybe even, it's not a huge spot of land, but that's a pretty good spot of land in that area where they are. And it's near a highway, so they can get some traffic that way, and it'll be more convenient for some of their members. Their future is bright. I took this picture of the sunset one day as we were out driving. It reminded me of John 9:4. Jesus says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. There is so much potential for the work there in Costa Rica, and God says especially. I'm excited about it. I told Hayner I hope we can work it out where we can take another trip down there, because there are so many people in that area that are interested. They want to study the Bible. And we had a seriously full house on Sundays, you'll see in just a moment. And then finally, just a few pictures here to show you, as Psalm 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. These are pictures of the volcano that you could see from a distance on the way to Hayner's parents' house. This is a picture of Cocoa Beach, very pretty. Some type of cruise ship out there off the coast. I don't know what was going on with that. Hayner said he'd never seen that before. It's not a typical stopping place for a cruise ship. So they may have had some kind of mechanical trouble and got close to shore so they could get mechanics out there or something. I don't know. But a beautiful spot. This is Llanos de Cortez waterfall. Wonderful. Just amazing spot there. I was able to get a pretty good panoramic picture with my phone. And then there's just a straight-on view of the falls. I took this picture just because it was kind of neat walking down the road there. It reminded me of Amos 3, verse 3. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Here are the final numbers from our trip. 67 Bible studies. Sometimes we would study the Bible multiple times with different people. One study, Carlos got 10 of his workers together. Wade sat down with 10 workers. Not all of them were his workers. Some of them were family members of his workers. But 10 different people sat in on one study. And Wade said we had a lot of good questions, a lot of interest. So 67 total Bible studies, 45 different member visits, edification, visiting people who were, maybe they were sick, maybe like the sister who had her husband in prison and things like that. 14 benevolent cases where we help people, some Christians, some not. There's a brother, I'll show you his picture in just a moment. His wife has MS. He's quit his job to take care of her. They are like a love story you'd read about in a movie. I guess see in a movie, read about in a book. But they're just, this couple's so in love with one another, and she won't let anybody, she can't get up and down, and she won't let anybody pick her up and help her except her husband. Even when they baptized her, Hayner said, she had her husband get in the water and help with her, and she is so in love with him, and he's so in love with her. He quit his job to take care of her. He sells little popsicles as best he can out of his house to take care of her and to provide for them. But his bike is broken or something that he uses for transportation. So they gave him money either to buy a new bike or to get his bike repaired. Things like that were benevolent help. And of course, we had 7 baptisms. I told the guys that's not too bad for 2 guys and 2 translators. I think we did a lot of work, but I'm not foolish. I realize this is because other people went in and they helped pave the way for people who were interested to continue studying, and that come to fruition. But, the work of the church we often point out is evangelism, edification, and benevolence. And that's exactly what we did. We did a lot of evangelism, Bible studies with non-Christians. We edified members who needed encouragement. We help to spend a lot of time. I taught on Sunday a new converts class, just kind of covering basics. Now that I'm a Christian, what now? That type of thing. And then benevolence as well. So we did the work of the church while we were there. Here is a picture of Sunday morning worship. There you see the sister who has MS. I forget their names. I just went blank. But her husband's right here beside her. Just a wonderful couple. You see over here on the wall of the church building, 1 Peter 4:11, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. I love that little painting on the wall. But we had a packed house on Sunday. Wade observed we have some things that we learned from this trip as we close our thoughts out. We have different skin colors from some of these people. But you know, we're all of one blood. We're all of one descent. Acts 17:26 says, there are things that are different, and yet there are so many things that are in common. You go to there and we worship. Maybe we worship in a different language, but we worship the same because we're following the New Testament. We also observe that we don't speak the same language physically, but we do spiritually. That's Paul's admonition in 1 Corinthians 1:10, that you all speak the same thing. And when we follow the New Testament, that's exactly what we do. And then we're divided by water physically, but spiritually we are united by water. For by one Spirit have you all been baptized into one body. I love those thoughts. You know, there are a lot of things that are different, but there are so many things that are the same. What a great opportunity we had to go and to teach the gospel, to preach the gospel, but also just to be serving in the Lord's kingdom. I appreciate the congregation here for making that possible, but as we close out our thoughts, you know, what this was all about was doing the Lord's work, to go into all the world and teach the gospel to every creature. But that starts right here at home and making sure that we're right with God. And so as we close out our thoughts here tonight, it may be that you've not responded to heaven's great invitation to come confessing Christ as a penitent believer, to be immersed in water, to have your sins washed away. It may be that you've done that, but as a child of God, you've wandered away. God's work needs to be our work, and we need to be out teaching others. But first, we've got to make sure we are right with the Lord. Heaven's invitation is open. If you need to respond, won't you come while we stand and sing to encourage?